I want to welcome everyone who's joined the call today. How many people does it take to change Florida? A lot. And so I thank all of you for joining us. And for those of you who I don't know, my name is Margie Stein. And I want to welcome 3 of our House District candidates to the call. Let's meet E.J. Bernier, who's running in House District 83. This is kind of the Port St. Lucie, Jensen Beach area. EJ, as he said, is on a break from work. He's a firefighter, he's a paramedic and former Marine. He's running to advocate for Florida's working families, ensure that everyone has access to quality, affordable health care. So take it away, EJ.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm actually still at the fire station. I had somebody cover me. The tones went off, so if you hear some sirens, sorry about that. No, he's not here. Sorry, I got coworkers here too. So no, really quickly about me. I grew up in this area. My values come from my upbringing. My mom was a waitress for 40-something years. My dad was a machinist, and watching them day in, day out grind to make a great life for me and my siblings. Watching them work and giving all they have is really what kind of set my values as in terms of really fighting, not just for working people, but for working poor, for people that want to be in the middle class, and not just the middle class, people that want to climb that ladder into the middle class. So I have 3 beautiful boys. My wife is a speech pathologist. She works in the school system. So she is also a union member, a union worker like me. And I believe in the union. I believe the weekend was brought to you by our local union and a 40-hour work week. And so we're going to work for those. We're going to really work for those workers' rights and also not just that, but healthcare costs and things that affect everyday families. Healthcare costs, writing that check for that deductible, writing that check for that copay, having to be able to pay for prescription medications for their kids. Being able to stay home with the kids when they're sick and not worry about, having a paid day off because your kid is sick. Being able to take a normal, small vacation with your family. Spending time with your family so you don't have to work 80, 90 hours to make the rent. These are all things that affect our everyday working families. Public education. My wife, like I said, my wife works in the public school system to make sure our public schools, I put the emphasis on public, our public schools are funded the way they're supposed to be funded, and not siphoning money for these charter schools and for these unregulated private schools. So the wealthy can get a little kickback when they send their kid to some prep school. To make sure our public schools are funded and our kids are getting the most they can out of them, and our teachers are making a living salary to make sure they can take care of their families. And working as a paramedic, firefighter, in this pandemic is really stressful, and unfortunately, we're hearing a lot of misinformation and a lot of noise from people who really think that it's made up. This is real. This is real, and we go on COVID patients every day. The way we work in our fire department is that when we have a confirmed COVID patient or a possible, signs and symptoms of a COVID patient, we have to transport that patient, make sure we have all our PPE on, and then we have to take a shower. We get back to station to make sure we're clean for the next call. Last shift, I took 10 showers to make sure that, that's how this pandemic is affecting this area. And so also for the environment, to make sure to restore that water flow south through the Everglades into Florida Bay, to make sure our water is clean, our air is clean, to make sure that we fight climate change. It's probably one of the biggest threats to humankind today is climate change. To make sure we fight for things like infrastructure, to make sure that if you have an electric car, there's places for you to charge. It sounds simple, but it's things that we don't have in Florida. So for our environment. So these are all things I'm running for. And last election, the Democratic nominee, his name is Matthew Theobald, a great friend of mine. He actually contributed to our campaign. He lost by only 3,200 votes, which equals to just about 3%. And that was 2 years ago. And the environment right now in this election year is different. We have an energized Democratic base, but we also have people that are sick of the divisiveness and the fear mongering from our friends on the right. And so this is a ripe area to flip this seat, which is going to be important when it comes to gun safety. I'm glad to say I was considered a gun sense candidate from Mothers Demand Action. And so those are things I'm really going to fight for. This is a very winnable seat. Only, like I said, 3,200 votes. So, for people to get involved and to support this campaign, it might be the support we need to push over the top and to turn this seat blue.
Does anybody have any questions of the candidates or anything that we're doing?
This is Allison here. I just wanted to ask, given everything going on with the racial justice movement across the country right now, I know Florida has plenty of issues as it is, obviously COVID being a major one. I'm curious what the candidates' positions are on that topic and funding for police being diverted to community programs, and what your stance is on that that movement.
One of the big things is she's right. We need to treat addiction as a health crisis, not a criminal crisis, and to make sure that people have the access to healthcare, expanding Medicaid, make sure people have access to healthcare. And a lot of people don't have that. I'm very lucky. Our family's blessed through our collective bargaining. We have access to healthcare, but that needs to be everybody. It's a right. Another thing is, she's right. Black Lives Matter. And I was lucky enough to go to a couple of protests, and there's many things we can do to make sure that we all are treated equally, especially our brothers and sisters, our Black brothers and sisters, is make sure that have incentives for all the police departments to have body cams, and make sure they have body cams and make sure they are on, because it doesn't make a difference if they have it or not. If it's not on, there needs to be some sort of accountability. Punishment. If you don't have your camera on when you're making an arrest, when you're interacting with the public, that is wrong. Another thing is do everything in my power to make sure that the private prisons don't have the power. To make sure one of the reasons we have such an incarceration issue in this country is because we are incentivizing prisons that have prisoners. And to me, that doesn't make sense. We need to make sure that is a public good, to make sure that our focus is on rehab, to get people back into society. What does that mean? Well, that means make sure they can vote, make sure they can get a job, to make sure minor drug offenses like marijuana are getting rid of and expunged, to make sure they can get a job and get rid of those records. I'm also for the legalization of marijuana in our state, because too many. I tell you what, as a paramedic, I've been on this many calls because of marijuana. I can't tell you how many calls I've been on because of alcohol. And so we need to make sure that we have common sense solutions that affect all of us, make sure that we treat all of us equally, and we're not doing that right now. So I would absolutely fight for criminal justice reform, make sure that addiction is treated as a mental health crisis, and to make sure that law enforcement is accountable. And that also means to make sure that their budgets reflect. We don't need armed people to respond because there's a homeless person in front of Publix. We need that funding to go to social services, to make sure to help people and not to punish them and not to arrest them. It doesn't make sense.
I actually have a question on the charter school issue. So I'm here in Southwest Florida, and the sort of conventional wisdom around one of the reasons that Andrew Gillum is not our governor is that the Republicans did an amazing amount of outreach to African-American moms who in fact want their children in charter schools, because depending on where they live, that is the child's best ticket out. And so for this part of Florida, we have to be very careful when we talk about education. And I'm just curious if any of you, the three of you, have any thoughts about how we turn the tide on this issue. Thank you.
So, no, the thing is, there is, in some neighborhoods, if that is the viable option, charter school, my problem with charter schools is not so much they exist. My problem with charter schools is that they're not being held to the same standards as the public schools in the area. And I honestly think that the public schools in the area, the school districts, should set the standards, not the state. And so a lot of times what these charter schools are doing is that they're lobbying Tallahassee to make sure that the state can override local school districts and their standards. We have a charter school in the area I live that has no busing, and that happens to be in an affluent area. And so they brag how they're an A school. Well, of course you're an A school when you can cherry pick just the area around you because nobody else can really drive their kid. Most people that are hard workers and work 60, 70 hours a week can't take the time to drive across town to take them to that particular charter school. So you're right. It's if you siphon money from public schools and then you say they're failing, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, it's let the local districts set the standards and don't let charter schools go to Tallahassee and lobby them to override local districts.